cyber attacks are only going to increase. You have to assume that at some point there'll be a breach. Then resilience becomes the only play, right? If you get attacked, how quickly can you recover? The other thing that's happening is agents are being deployed everywhere. Agents have access to systems. That's how they help humans do their work. But what that also means is they hallucinate, and we're still in the early stages of the ways in which these agents can be compromised. So we have to assume that they will be compromised either through hallucinations or through malicious prompts or prompt injection. So that means these agents can go rogue and cause a lot of damage, and they operate at 10x or 100x the speed of humans.
Hi everybody, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining another episode of the Boardroom Club. My name is Yossi Garmazi, and today we are fortunate enough to interview none other than Arvind Nithrakashyap, co-founder and CTO of Rubrik, the cyber powerhouse that revolutionized cyber resilience by redefining how organizations protect, secure, and recover their data. So without further ado, Arvind, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show. Great to be here.
The pleasure is all ours. So, Arvind, before we go into Rubrik, I have actually a fascinating question about your time at IIT, because you said that you learn more from classmates hacking Broken Sun workstation than the classes themselves. So I was wondering if you can tell us some behind the scenes stories and how did it shape your approach in a way about building companies, product?
Yeah, so obviously I went to IIT in the early 90s, and I think the IITs today are probably very different from what things were back then. At that stage, I think India was still very much in the early stages of, everything tech or even the economic liberalization, all of that. So access to resources were not as easy as it was now. For an example, we used to have, I think, for 30 students and multiple classes, we had eight personal computers that we would all share. We would often get like slots at 3 a.m. and things like that. And so it was still very much, this was pre-internet, pre-web and all of that. So the level of exposure was still pretty limited. And obviously we had professors with a lot of experience who would take classes and stuff like that, but we didn't necessarily have access to the information that students have today, like the internet, web, AI, everything that I think today when I talk to students in IIT, they're way more knowledgeable about the world in general than we ever were. And obviously we were taught courses and we learned concepts and all of that. But the essence of really the essence of knowledge that I think I accumulated was actually through my classmates. I mean, the thing with the IITs is that they have this very competitive exam. And when you look at a class like computer science at IIT Madras, you have some extremely smart people who are your classmates. And again, like even when we were having discussions just in a dorm room, sitting in a common area and having discussions, we would have all sorts of crazy discussions, whether it was actual tech or even outside of tech and life in general. And these were extremely smart people who are still extremely good friends of mine today. And they continue to be, I still have a lot of respect for them as extremely smart individuals and very fortunate to know them as friends. So I think a lot of the stuff I learned just conceptually, I would say the innate and abstract understanding of technology and just concepts we were learning as students was really hardened by these conversations we would have. And I mean, there were definitely people much smarter than me who could explain things better than even my professors could. So I feel like I learned a lot more sitting in my dorm room and talking to my friends than maybe even what I learned in class.
Yeah, I love it. And speaking about India as a whole, so we hosted a couple of companies from the region, Pocket FM and also Capillary Technology. So it's amazing just to see how Indian has evolved from being, known for outsourced technology to essentially build the technology in-house. And people say even deep tech going to be the next big thing.
Obviously, at Rubrik, we opened our Bangalore office back in 2017. So now we're almost coming up on 10 years there. And I think I have learned a lot about the Indian ecosystem through that, because I've never worked in India. I went to school and then I came here for work. But just working with just the team that we have there and looking at the talent and what the kinds of talent we have access to there has been very eye-opening to see that there is a lot of talent, there's a lot of entrepreneurial energy as well that I sense in Bangalore. And there are people who have left Rubrik and formed their own startups down the road. In fact, some of our executives, when we've taken them there, have said it reminds me of what you hear about the United States back in the late 19th, early 20th century. Like there's a lot of energy and fervor to go really build businesses, take new ideas, innovation. I feel like, especially in Bangalore, you definitely feel that.
I agree. Bangalore is definitely the Silicon Valley of India. And okay, we also mentioned the access to knowledge, right? So we got to talk about open source a bit, right? CISOs are freaking out about all the supply chain risks. So I was curious if you can tell us, where does Rubrik stand on this debate? And do you see that open source can essentially thrive in the cybersecurity space where the stakes are exceptionally high?
Now, I think we are well into the phase where we understand the value that open source brings to the ecosystem, technology landscape, industry in general, right? I mean, everything that we talk about today runs on Linux servers, which itself was the beginning of the whole open source movement. And I think we have reached a stage where open source has been embraced by the industry, and there's obviously a certain IP that you may create, but very often you're leveraging a lot of open source technology to deliver that, build or deliver that to your customers. And the approach that at Rubrik we have taken is that there's obviously core IP and things that, I'm not saying all our products are open source, but then there are aspects of our platform that where we felt that that wasn't part of a core IP, that the industry could benefit from things like that. We have some of the things, enhancements we have made as open source, even some internal platform level software that we had built in the early days, we have released as open source. So we firmly believe that open source has a huge role to play. And especially in this new world where with AI, especially when you talk about cybersecurity, there is a lot of things are changing very quickly. And there's only so much that you can build within an organization. Yes, you're accelerating through AI and things like that. But I think as an industry, we need to rely on each other. And open source is actually a great way in which certain common frameworks, platforms can be built that everybody else could build on. Obviously, there's a lot of debate today about just models themselves. I think people confuse open source with open weight. I think what we have in the model space is more open weight. It's not necessarily open source as in the traditional sense of the word, but I think the flexibility that open weight models gives is the ability for organizations to run them in any configuration they want, use them for different use cases, maybe even use a multitude of models, and gives full control. And what we have seen is once you enable open source and embrace open source across the industry, that actually becomes a baseline for a lot of other very interesting developments, because some of the hard problems could be solved at the open source layer, and then organizations or companies are able to build technology innovation on top of that and deliver value to customers. I don't think the value of open source has diminished. Arguably, I would say it's even more important today than it was before. And at Rubrik, we are fully committed to partnering as well as anything that we can deliver an open source form to the community we would.
And you mentioned all the open weights ecosystem. So we actually just hosted one of the co-founder of Firewall. So it was interesting
Yeah.
to see with all the token economy, though suddenly, I mean, you could maybe use a little bit less token that you used to by
Yeah.
using sort of like the open weight models with Kimi, Llama, and others. So, I mean, it makes sense.
I think we're reaching a stage where I think people are trying to figure out the right model for right use cases. And having a multitude of models is actually a good thing because it enables you to use different models for different use cases. And that actually brings a better, both in terms of customer experience and value. I think that's the right way to move forward.
When you want to book a flight, you don't need the strongest model out there, right? Or just like to
Yes.
sell something in OpenAI, or you just like to sell something in LLM. I mean,
My favorite quote there is, I don't need my model to write French poetry. I just wanted to automate my tasks.
there you go. And speaking about AI, so we got to mention also all the RAG technology because it's interesting. People now talk about structured data and unstructured data in a way. But if you look at Rubrik, essentially Rubrik started in the data backup space and evolved into cyber resilience. But as I mentioned, now suddenly you have all the backup that you could use with RAG technology and base AI system. I mean, do you see Rubrik go beyond protecting the data to help organizations securely discover some of the unstructured data, i.e. to train the models or something of that sort?
So when we started the company, we saw an opportunity where if we built the platform right, we could do more for the data than just pure protection recovery use cases, right? So that was kind of the vision behind the platform. Over time, as we've evolved the platform, I think what we have seen is that we focus on the data space in terms of supporting various kinds of applications, whether it's cloud, data center, or SaaS. And then we took that same platform and extended it to identity systems as well. So today we do for identity systems what we also do for data applications and systems. In this new world, what we're kind of seeing two large macro trends, right? One is we've heard about Mythos and all of these different kinds of models that now can really, for lack of a better term, they're democratizing hacking, right? In the sense that these models can go and you point them to a piece of code, they can go and find vulnerabilities that no other tool could. And what that does is it makes it easier for even an average hacker to use these models to now figure vulnerabilities and mount attacks, because the model actually kind of builds that attack chain for you. So what is going to happen is, I think cyber attacks are only going to increase. And as a result, breaches will happen. You have to assume that at some point there'll be a breach. Then resilience becomes the only play, right? If breaches are going to happen, then the question becomes, how resilient are you to those breaches? If you get attacked, how quickly can you recover? So that is one thing that I think is definitely going to keep increasing, and organizations have to think about that. Secondly, I think the other thing that's happening is there's agents are being deployed everywhere. Agents have access to systems. That's how they can do the work, help humans do their work. But what that also means is, but they hallucinate, and we're still in the early stages of the ways in which these agents can be compromised, right? I mean, prompt injection, there are all sorts of different ways, and we're still in the early stage of figuring out how to safeguard against that. So we have to assume that they will be compromised either through hallucinations or through malicious prompts or prompt injection. So that means that these agents can go rogue and cause a lot of damage, and they operate like 10x or 100x the speed of humans. So resilience becomes a common theme across both of these kinds of attack vectors that are only going to become more and more prevalent. And our take is that if you think about how to solve that, you need to understand data and applications. You need to understand identities, because these agents, for example, assume identities, or these kinds of breaches actually compromise identities. That's become the attack vector. And then the question becomes, how do you protect against these? And the solutions often have to be through platforms that lie at the intersection of data, identity, and AI, right? You need to understand all of that. And we actually see this opportunity now in terms of what we have built in this platform over time, right? Starting from supporting applications in the data center to cloud to SaaS to identity systems. And now we are building some solutions around AI as well. We see ourselves as being in this unique intersection of data, identity, and AI. And we feel we can offer them solutions. So which is why we are offering solutions around both in terms of, can we help you monitor, govern, and even recover actions that your agents may take, wrong actions that they may do. And secondly, we have also announced some products around how can you make it easy for you to access the large amounts of, like, you have large amounts of unstructured data. How can we help you access those very specific amounts of unstructured data that you need for your AI models and so on? So we are building a whole bunch of products in that. We're still in the early stages of that. And obviously the overall industry is also in the early stages of that. And so we are trying to work closely with our customers, understand how we can help them accelerate their AI transformation through these kinds of platforms that make their AI systems more resilient, or their organizations more resilient in this new era of agents. And so that's kind of where we are focused on.
It's more relevant than ever. Just in the last couple of weeks, we saw Antropic and OpenAI, just some of their agents going rogue.
Yes.
While even though it was sort of like an in-house project that they tried, but it just went off the rail.
These are probabilistic systems that we are used to writing deterministic software that we can validate and we know exactly what they do. These systems are actually probabilistic and obviously very powerful. So I think we're still figuring out how do we reason about these systems and how do we put the right kind of guardrails around it.
You mentioned all the deterministic and probabilistic, so it's a great segue for my next question, because enterprise security is essentially relied up until now on deterministic policies, right? You need to do X if Y happen. But what happens when LLM is actually probabilistic, right? How do you see, for example, zero trust principle in regard to autonomous AI agents, in a way that some of the security breaches cannot be predicted with certainty?
I think we are entering a completely new era in terms of technology, right? So, I mean, I've spent 30 years in the industry. Pretty much, I would say most of my focus has been on saying, how do I build software that's deterministic, that I can stand behind what it does because I know exactly how it does and what it does and things like that. So yes, to your point, we are moving into this completely new era of where we are almost programming the systems in natural language. And these systems are going to interpret that and act in a probabilistic fashion, just like humans do. Humans operate in a probabilistic fashion, but apply their own judgment. The challenge we have is that we don't know how to ensure that these systems, deploy judgment. So we have to put guardrails around that. And I think the guardrails take kind of two forms, right? So historically, we have relied on access control as a way to provide the right kind of access for humans who are doing work. Like, so for example, my email is private to me. You cannot see my email, and I cannot see your email. So those kinds of access controls have been put in place. But most access controls have been focused on humans, right? On humans, and how do we make sure that each human has access to the right set of applications or data or operations, and only that. But they shouldn't get access to things that they should not. In this new world, so yes, so we do need. I think we do need some form of access control. So, for example, you can think of access control as the first layer of defense. So, for example, you might give access to an agent to process your emails, summarize your emails, and give you maybe a list of 3 things that you need to focus on this morning. Right? The first thing, maybe you want an agent that before you walk into work, it tells you, summarizes your emails, it tells you, hey, these are 3 top things that you should address. So that's an agent with that you have given access control to your inbox to do things. So that's, and this agent will not have access to my email and look at mine because this is running on your behalf. But on the other hand, you may have a policy that says, I do not want this agent to send emails to your customers or external recipients. Maybe it's okay for it to send emails within your organization or your partners, but you don't want them to send it to your clients or your larger viewer base or things like that. So now that is not something you can enforce through access control. This is almost a policy that you're defining, saying when an email goes out to all your, say, your viewer base or your customers, you want that to be vetted by you before. You don't want it automatically sent out. You cannot enforce this through access control. So then what you need is almost I would say, a probabilistic layer that interprets your policy and determines whether an action that an agent is taking is okay or not. If you think about this is really, again, you want a model to kind of almost put a guardrail on what your agents are doing. So in some ways, you'll have some level of access control that gives you some high level guardrails on the agents. But then you will also need some kind of, I'll call it AI as a model as a judge, or some dynamic way in which you are providing a high level policy, and actions that are being taken are vetted against that policy and saying, hey, are you violating the policy or not? And if it's violating the policy, ideally you want that stopped right there, so that you don't have it go do something that you don't expect it to do. Or it may enforce a human to validate before that action is taken. So I think we'll need both. I mean, we need a combination of these. And I think organizations, as they roll out agents, will have to think about how do they put these kinds of guardrails, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to roll out these agents because we believe it can be a huge productivity booster for their employees, and as well as provide better value to their customers.
Right.
But you need these kinds of guardrails to make sure they don't go off the rails. One of the things we haven't figured out yet is how do we let AI have good judgment, right? I mean, judgment is still relying on humans. So how can you put the guardrails so that when it goes off the rails, we have the right set of guardrails around it? So I think we'll need a combination of these kinds of solutions to be able to, deploy agents at scale and be confident that things won't go off the rails.
And specifically, I guess now with all things essentially happening in the speed of light, it's good luck for the CISOs, as they say.
I don't envy CISOs their job.
No, neither do I. And okay, products like Agent Rewind of Rubrik, very revolutionary indeed, but it's interesting because it tackled a new challenge, mistakes made by, as we said, autonomous AI agents. But I'm curious, how did your team build the audit trail to essentially know if an incident was caused by a flawed AI prompt, maybe agent decision, or even compromised user credential, meaning the old days?
There are a few factors here. I think it's, in some level, it maybe starts with identifying what agents are doing, right? Visibility is an important first step here. And how do you get visibility? You do that by, one, understanding what identities agents assume, right? So for example, are they running on behalf of you as a human? Because there will always be personal agents that are acting on behalf of employees themselves. Or there could be what I call backend agents that are operating with their own identities, given a specific set of permissions for the task they need to do. For example, there might be an agent that shepherds a procurement process through an organization. So it'll have access to certain sets of applications that it can use to move this along the procurement process with the right kind of human review. So it's important to understand the identity context. Now, based on the identity context and understanding what applications you have access to, you can assess the risk of an agent. So, for example, if there's in a healthcare hospital or healthcare organization, if an agent is actually has access to patient information, right? Now, that is a very, I would say, sensitive or high risk agent where you do not want this agent to go and publish the data somewhere or do something wrong or delete any data or something like that. On the other hand, there might be another agent that is, maybe is looking at some software logs and diagnosing some errors. Now, that may be less, it may be less sensitive. It may still be an important agent, but you're less worried about data breaches or data leaks through that. So the first thing is understanding what are your high risk agents versus your low risk agents, right? So then you know what agents to focus on from a guardrail perspective. Then the next piece is, now can you put these dynamic policies in place that will prevent it from doing actions that may, for example, do not never delete any data in this system because this is my core patient data. Nothing can be deleted here. So if you see any action that looks like a deletion, can you either monitor it or stop it? Now, policies again cannot be perfect. Policies often are iterative. You'll start with the policy, you'll realize that, oh, I missed this, and you keep iterating the policy. And that's where the agent rewind piece that we talk about came in, because we said, okay, now if the agent does something wrong, it does delete some patient data. But that's where the platform we have already comes in place, because we have been, if you're protecting this application, we can now restore the data back or undo the wrong change that the agent made. So it's a combination of all of this. And actually, we deliver Agent Rewind through our Rubrik Agent Cloud platform. And what that does is it provides you this monitoring capability, the governance, the runtime governance kind of capability, as well as the ability to recover from failures as well. And I think you need all three of these to have full confidence that you can actually deploy an agent and have peace of mind that this won't go, something won't go wrong by deploying this agent. But yeah, I think understanding the data, the identity context, and the relationship between them is a critical piece of this. And through our platform, we'd already been building this. So this was as we saw agents becoming more and more mainstream, this kind of became a natural, next step to build on, because of all the information we're all accumulated in our platform across all these applications and IT systems that organizations use.
When you think about agents, right, there are dozens, if not, I don't know, hundreds of agents, right? And
Yeah.
millions of tokens are being used every day. Is the idea of zero trust still realistic in the cybersecurity world in order to ensure that, say, agents don't go wrong or something of that sort? Or we need to maybe amplify to change it to something completely new?
I think zero trust still very much applies, right? Maybe it's even more important, because if you go to the logical direction where things are moving, in a few years, you will probably have agents doing most of the work that humans do today. And humans are going to become more the reviewers, approvers, orchestrators of this work. But then inherently, as I said, these are probabilistic systems that you can't exactly predict what they will do. I liken it to toddlers. Toddlers are, you can tell them, don't do this, but they'll come up with very creative ways of doing things that you never thought of, right? So, AI is something like that. And these systems are only getting more and more powerful. So from that perspective, I think zero trust becomes even more important. And that's where what you have to do is you need to have, as you roll out these agents, you need to have, I would say, parallel systems that act as checks and balances to this. So I talked about the access control piece. Now, again, if you look at access control, today, when a human wants to do something, you give them access and you say, okay, that's yours. As long as you're employed in this company, they have this access. And you kind of trust that once a human learns how to do something, they're not going to repeat the same mistakes again and again. With agents, it's very easy for them to get confused. So something that an agent did perfectly 5 minutes ago, the next time it does it, it could do something very different, because somehow the context it got is slightly different and it gets confused and may hallucinate. So from that perspective, maybe what we need to do is move to a model where the permissions that you get are actually based on the intent. So based on the action you're going to take, imagine if you were dynamically given an access token that is only valid for 1 minute and then it expires. The other challenge we often face is that today, the way many people run, especially run personal agents, is they get a token, like, for example, to access to your Gmail, access to your other applications. put token in laptop and let the agent access it. So if your laptop gets compromised or stolen, suddenly all your tokens are now available for an attacker to use. So you also need to move away from where these tokens are sitting in everybody's laptops, devices, whatever, to a more centralized way of managing this, which means that you need to be able to create these tokens. And even if you use these tokens, they should expire and they should be short-lived so that even if somebody gets access to it, they don't have long-term access to an organization's applications. So again, I think this is going to evolve. And I think we will probably have, I would say, more dynamic permissions for agents, coupled with these kinds of policy-based, maybe AI-driven checks and balances that ensure that agents are not doing something that we don't expect them to do. So I think zero trust is very, very much important. In fact, my view, zero trust is going to evolve into these kinds of guardrails and checks and balances that we trust. Even if you trust that the agent will do the right thing, you have to keep verifying and put the right guardrails.
Like a toddler. So it's all about check and balances and what I will take. It's also all about intent, AI agents and intent, right? And okay, Rubrik is a giant corporation by now, not the small startup that it used to be maybe a decade ago, but you're also going through this AI transformation to acclimatize to this new AI native world in a way. How do you measure ROI now in the new AI world with the tokens, no token, agents, and so on?
It's a great question. In fact, maybe it's a top question of our times.
And we have
I
quantum.
think
Next question. So
maybe, yeah. I mean, obviously, there have been lots of metrics. People look at just in the software engineering space, for example. People have been looking at, how much code is generated by AI, how many tokens are engineers burning, and things like that. I look at it slightly differently because at the end of the day, everybody is in service of the business, right? Whatever role you're in service of the business. And you have to look at what are measurable business outcomes from this. So when we rolled out AI transformation within the company, and we started with engineering as the first organization that embarked on this journey, I said, I don't care about other metrics. There are only two metrics I care about. If we truly get productivity through agentic software development, one thing I expect to see is how much of our roadmap is getting accelerated. So for example, let's say we have a beginning of the year, we have a roadmap. We say we'll deliver these features in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Are there things in Q4 that I can bring to Q2? Because now I'm seeing acceleration, right? But to me, then there you're having value to the business because things that you thought will take a year to deliver, and now you're delivering 6 months. And now you have more capabilities that you can deliver to your customers and we can drive higher revenue. And the only other metric I said I care about is obviously there will be software defects. Can I actually reduce the amount of time, the mean time to resolve software defects? Because it directly translates to better customer experience. So very often people may have bugs, but they may also want enhancements. Today an enhancement may take 6 months for us to go deliver. Can we deliver that in a month? Or even better, can we deliver that in a week? And that is true customer delight because they ask for something and we are like, we can very quickly deliver that. So to me, the goal I set for the organization is that these are the only two metrics I care about, and let's optimize towards those metrics. Everything else is a secondary metric, which maybe helps us in that direction, but I won't consider this as success or true ROI until I see movement in these two metrics. And that's what we've been measuring against as we go through this journey.
Now more than ever, it's so easy to build new features to the products, but it's so hard at the same time to choose what you want to build to make a real impact on the client, the end user at the end, right?
Exactly,
And okay, we spoke about AI, so we need to speak about another big relevant questions today. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be in like a couple of years, but quantum, right? There is a lot of talks about quantum, specifically also in terms of the cybersecurity side of it. People say it could cause a bigger disruption in terms of encryption, decryption, judgment day, as they say, for cybersecurity. How should security leaders prepare for this future? Because in a way, some people say now quantum is going to be only in a couple of years for the last decade or so. They say like only in a couple of years. So
obviously, quantum, I would say there's a lot of potential, and we are seeing some early signs that there's some advancements being made on the quantum side. From a cybersecurity perspective, the biggest threat is that everything that we use, from a cryptographic standards to encryption, all of that suddenly now becomes fair game, right? I mean, they're almost like it's a judgment day scenario, right? Everything changes if quantum becomes the norm. That said, I think there's still a lot of debate on really how far away quantum is, right? Very honestly, I think it's still not clear that we are anywhere close to building quantum computing at scale. There are early experiments and some early green shoots, but we may still be multiple years away from something realistic operating at scale. But that said, I don't think we can wait for complete clarity, right? Because this is going to evolve. And so I think the way to think about it is that I think there are already some work that's been done in terms of quantum safe encryption. There are standards that are being published where people are looking at different techniques than what we've used in the past. And then there is some work being done in terms of taking these standards and providing implementations from an encryption perspective. I think the best way to look at this is that we can't predict whether it'll be realistic in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We don't know that yet. It's still hard to say. The best way is to kind of keep abreast of what's happening in the industry as these new standards come in, and think of ways in which we can start incorporating them into our software products. For example, some of the browsers and all of that have started incorporating some of these, even though we don't know when quantum will become real. I think we have to keep our eyes and ears open as new techniques come in, figure out, put that into your roadmap, make sure that we start supporting those. And customers also beginning to ask questions about that. So for example, at Rubrik, what we're doing is we are trying to make sure that we look at these techniques and start incorporating those into our own standards and implementations so that we are prepared as the technology evolves. And if there's any kind of quick, massive shift, we are in a position to adapt to it. But I think being adaptive is key, because it's hard to predict, as I said, whether it's 2 years away or 20 years away.
It all goes back to your point about check and balances to be ready for this day. And we hosted a couple of folks from the quantum industry, and it seems it's all about error correction at this point, because they do have the qubits, like 100 qubits, 200 qubits, but it still make error every thousands or like 10,000 time, rather than a normal transistor that once in a trillion or something of that sort.
Exactly.
Okay. Last questions before we go into the rapid fire questions. So how do you see the role of CISOs evolving in this new AI world, quantum world, etc.? I mean, we mentioned that now it's not for the faint of heart, but how do you see it being maybe the new CIO of the organization, or not necessarily?
The role of security and the role of CISO, the way I look at the role of CISO is what the CISO is trying to do is ensure that they are trying to protect the business against risk, right? That is their fundamental job. And if anything, the risks are only increasing, right? So I don't think the role of the CISO goes away by any means. In fact, I would say it becomes even more important. We are also seeing this trend where CIOs and CISOs are coming closer and closer together, because they are almost tight at the hip, because anything that you do today, you have to make sure they're secure because of the way in which things are evolving. And in some cases, we are actually seeing the CIO and CISO role even being merged, and a single person doing both. So I don't think the role of the CISO goes away. I think what happens is that what is probably going to happen is that with AI and everything that's happening, the pace of change is going to be very high. And in some ways today, often security organizations what they try to do is to have absolute 100% visibility on everything that's going in, have the right kinds of sensors or signals that if something goes wrong, they can quickly act upon it. With AI, what's going to happen is that both the attack is going to be driven by AI. And so as a result, even the defense is going to be driven by AI. And at some level, humans can't keep up, right? There might be suddenly you get 5 attacks a day, it might become 1,000 attacks a day. And there are probably agents managing those 1,000 attacks, while you're sleeping. But I think the role of humans is going to become saying it's more kind of like this trust but verify model, right? So you need to have ways in which you can understand what is happening at the macro level, and maybe have ways in which systems that, again, guardrails and checks and balances that will raise any red flags that they see as the system keeps processing, keeps going on. And then when those red flags pop up is when you go and understand what is happening there and see if something is off and you need to tune that better. And I think this is true not just for CISOs. I think everybody in technology is going to move into this from I would say almost like from an individual contributor to this. Suddenly you're a manager managing thousands of things happening in your watch. As a leader, that's how I have to operate. There are thousands of things that happen in my organization. I don't know everything that's happening, but I pick and choose the ones that I want to go deep into, understand what's happening, and see if there's an issue there or a bottleneck that I can go help resolve. And so I think every individual has to start acting in this manner, because a lot of the work will be done by agents and many of them autonomously. So I think from the CISO perspective, I think they themselves will have to have, I would say, agentic systems that are the first line of defense. And then they are really, CISOs and the organizations are kind of managing this and making sure that these are operating as expected. And if they see something that's not quite operating the way they expect, then go deep and understand what is going on there and fix it, right? So that's that. The role is going to evolve into that. But if anything, the risks are only going up. So it's even more important that CISOs have the right kind of tools at their disposal to be able to manage that.
Interesting time to say the least, and good luck for the CISOs again. We are rooting for you.
Absolutely.
And okay, now the last part of the interview, the rapid fire questions, but you could take the time however you want. So first question, advice for entrepreneurs, and specifically, I know that when you started Rubrik, there were already some big players out there like Veritas. So what will you advise entrepreneurs that build a company inside a space that there are already the incumbents there? Is it to think only about problem that or something else entirely?
It's a great question. It's always the toughest problem to solve, right? In the sense that, especially when there are incumbents in a space, I think the reason we were able to be successful is when we looked at the space, what we saw was there hadn't been much innovation in this particular space for a long time, right? Most of the innovation happened late 80s, early 90s. This is, I would say, even before the era of virtualization, leave alone cloud and SaaS. So when we came in 2014, we saw this opportunity to say, okay, now there's been no innovation. I can't, but the technology landscape has changed drastically. So it was almost a bit of an ignored space for a long time. And we said, okay, if you were to reimagine this, if you were to build with modern software stack, modern principles today, knowing what we know, how would we kind of approach this? And we were able to take a fresh approach, define a completely different platform, different architecture that was able to go and do things beyond what the incumbents were built for. And so, for example, in our case, we said, okay, what if we were to build a completely different architecture where we single stack of software, understood the data metadata together, put together, and thus had a very deep understanding of the application? Could we do more than just wait for something bad to happen? Could we add more value on top of the data? In some ways, could we become the time machine of data for the enterprise? What we realized was, with the rise of cyber attacks, cyber resilience was that value we could provide with this kind of a platform. And that's our true differentiation. And we pioneered the concept of cyber resilience using data protection as the underlying platform. So to entrepreneurs, I would say technology is evolving very quickly. Look at how say modern technology could do something very differently from what the incumbents are doing. But the other piece we cannot ignore is not just about technology product. It's really about our customers in a position to be able to absorb that. Market absorption. What does it take is it something that when you deliver this, can they absorb it and actually implement it quickly and get value quickly? Because if you're not able to get value quickly, it's very hard for a startup to succeed. The reason we were able to succeed is because we got a product out and we were able to get it to market, and the market was able to absorb it, and we were able to start getting revenue from that. If you don't do that, it's very hard to survive. So I think it's a combination of both. And so you need to have something, say, a disruptive platform that you build that is differentiated, and then the market can absorb it very quickly. Again, not an easy problem to solve, but this is what differentiates the winner, a startup that's able to scale versus something that will fail eventually.
Influential mentor in your life. I mean, at the end, you're very successful in Rubrik, but I guess there was someone, or maybe if you want to share a piece of advice that he or she gave you in the past. And
yeah, I don't know that there's a single mentor, but I've had a series of people who have helped shape my journey. In my early days at Oracle, one of the senior people I worked with did not come from a database background, came from operating systems kind of background. So he actually pulled me in to solve what was a pretty fundamental bottleneck in the core database product. And I think the way he approached it was very different from what even other very senior folks at Oracle were doing. And it was a very different mindset, a different approach. And he was willing to challenge, very established, but he came in from outside, but he was willing to challenge very, very established players who said, no, it can't be done. And we took a very different approach and we were able to solve it and actually solve a problem that other very established folks said that they could not be solved. And I think that was the learning for me, was that I think go back to first principles, apply the right set of principles, even if it's a different domain, and get to the root problem and then build from there, and do not be afraid to question, I'll call it authority, because sometimes you need a different mindset to solve a problem that people believe cannot be solved. So that I think was very good learning for me. And then I would say other folks who really helped me was the couple of founders. I worked at a startup before I started Rubrik. And I went to them and saying, the reason I'm joining a startup is I want exposure to more than just engineering. I want to be able to understand customers, be in front of customers, understand what sells, learn more about the business, understand some of the go-to-market side, go-to-market, customer success. I want to be able to involve all of that. And they really they opened it up and they said, yeah, they gave me the opportunity to build a new product. They gave me an opportunity to work with the sales team and be part of the pre-sales calls. I've gone and they allowed me to go and do POCs for customers. They allowed me to deal with an angry customer who landed up in our office and said, if you don't fix it this weekend, we're going to throw you out. So I learned how to deal with an angry customer. So I think I got a lot of exposure that I wouldn't have gotten even in large company Oracle. You don't get such opportunities. But working in the startup gave me a lot of learning on how to deal with the other aspects of business beyond technology. And I think that was very instrumental in me as when I started my own company as a co-founder, really helped me frame my journey there.
I love it. And okay, if you could grab a coffee with anyone, alive or historical, could be fictional, not fictional, who would it be?
Yeah, I think if I had to pick one, I think I would pick Nelson Mandela, and not because, everybody knows what he's done. I don't think that's not news to anybody. But I think the thing I really appreciate about him is the fact that I think there are a few things he did actually after he got released from prison, which is pretty amazing. I think today in this world, we have a lack of dignity in the public space, I feel. I think he was very much the example of dignity. He reached across the aisle. He didn't sow division. In fact, he was a uniter more than anybody else I know as a leader. And I think the biggest thing I have respect for is the fact that he did one term and he said, you know what, I'm going to step away because we need more people to come and take leadership reins and take the country where it needs to go, which is a very, very rare trait. And I think we could use more leaders like that in today's world, I feel.
I actually watched a really good movie. I don't remember if it was specifically about him, more about what he's done in South Africa with all the rugby there that united all the nation.
Invictus, right? I think you're talking about
Invictus,
Invictus. Yeah, it's a great movie. I think it captures his mindset, and I think it's rare.
I think with Matt Damon, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was Matt Damon and Morgan Freeman, and it captures that very well. But I feel that's becoming rarer and rarer today, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe with time we'll change it. Okay, in alternate universe, if you didn't start Rubrik in a totally alternate universe, you're not a founder of a tech company, what profession would you take?
I've had a lot of interest in music. I've dabbled with it in my personal space. In an alternate world, if I could be in the music business, that would be very interesting. Whether as a musician or even the music business, I think that would be something I would find very interesting.
That will be fun for sure. And okay, the last question, and this is the hardest one of them all. What is your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, that's an easy one. The Godfather. I think it is, to me, The Godfather is movie perfection. I've watched it multiple times. I can watch scenes of it anytime. I think it's direction, screenplay, acting, music. I think it's the best movie.
The first or the second one, or the whole
The first
trilogy?
one. The first one. Second one is all right. The first one is a classic.
Yeah.
It's my all-time favorite. Interestingly, I think it was released the year I was born. So
that's interesting. And the second one was fine, but then when they stopped for over a decade and then they released the third one, I don't know. It wasn't the same as the
third one wasn't very good. The second one, I just feel like Michael Corleone's character development gets a little too extreme. I think in the first one, you can understand each of the character arcs. Everything is beautifully done. Just the way the movie was taken, the music, the direction, the acting, it's amazing. I made my son watch it, saying that this is the best movie ever made. And it's not his favorite movie, but he agrees that it's really good.
You can go wrong when you put De Niro, Pacino, and all of the others together in one movie, right? So, And okay, Arvind, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been a joy hosting you. And so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And for everybody else in the audience, so stay tuned. We have other interesting episodes to show you from the former president of HubSpot. We have the CEO of Model ML. So it's going to be interesting. Stay tuned.